This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, it is 6:34. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Finally remembered to use it. If I can have everyone stand, and the flag is behind me here, to the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Play ball.
If Jesse, if you can give me a hand with the roll call.
Present.
Planning Commissioner Hill.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Oakletree.
Present.
Planning Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Keeler.
Present.
And Planning Commissioner Alston-Jones.
Here.
Thanks for coming, you all. I would, moving on in the agenda, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the June 14th minutes. I know not everyone was present.
So moved. I'll second it.
Great. Using unanimous consent, if there are no objections, I'll consider the June 14th minutes approved. Any objections? Going once? Going twice? Okay. June 14th meeting minutes are approved using unanimous consent. And I am going to take this opportunity to open up public comment. I don't think we only have one person online, and we have no one in the lobby, or in the meeting hall, I should say.
We do have one comment that someone sent in via a voicemail. It'll be the public hearing. Does that make sense? Never mind.
Oh, okay, so not related.
It's related to one of the items
On the agenda later on, so we'll play that during the public hearing portion.
Got it. Wow. Well, should I just slow down? We're going to get through this really quick. I'm just going to roll into 1.6 public hearings. Item 16A is the temporary use code. And I didn't want to wreck this, but temporary use codes were, I think, the Planning Commission's desire to make things more pro small business. And Ethan, I didn't know if you wanted to maybe speak on it for a minute for someone who hadn't been in the prior meetings, just in case.
Yeah, good evening. Is this mic on? Can you hear me okay? Okay.
I think I can hear you.
So yeah, the temporary use code update, we started probably about 4 months or so ago. This might be the 4th month. And the purpose of that is really just to kind of simplify the temporary use permit code, make the criteria for approval a little bit clearer, specify what conditions under which extensions can occur and what somebody has to do if they run out of their the period that they've been approved for. How did they apply for an extension? And that's based upon some experiences that we had with one temporary use permit in particular, which I think is the only temporary use permit in the city that that I'm aware of. And so, with those lessons learned, we decided that it would be good to open the whole temporary use permit code up. And the primary flexibility that's most noteworthy about the changes is that we're now, instead of allowing somebody 1 year under a temporary use permit, they can a temporary use permit can be for up to 3 years. So that provides new businesses, significant flexibility to get started under a temporary use permit, provided that they don't have permanent improvements, and then get going, and then hopefully establish a permanent use down the road.
Thank you, Ethan. I appreciate that overview. We don't have anyone in attendance, but what I was thinking is what we could do is open up the public hearing individually for each one of these things and then close it And then if someone shows up when we hit 1.6C, I would allow them to go back to one of the earlier ones if they really wanted to comment on it.
I do have a couple comments on this one. That's appropriate.
I'm not sure if it's considered public, but please do.
I think usually we have discussion before we open it up for public comment.
Well, and I don't, sorry to interrupt, Commissioner Nutbrock, but I don't, that wasn't technically my staff report, so I don't know if you want the staff report. Basically, it's just to point out the one change that was made since the June meeting, and that was pretty much the entirety of my staff report.
That's right. We did have, I remember there was some update we were waiting for on parking, and it required some research. But yeah, I think right, what we were trying to do is for the public hearing to open is to give like the public like the whole picture of what we had done in case they had an issue. So if it's relevant to that, I think you should include that, and then Commissioner Nutbrock could also say something as well.
Yeah, so like I said, there was only one change, and this was 2 months ago, so you might not quite remember it, and you had a month off. But the change, if you remember, was having to do with extensions, and there was a couple of options for how existing temporary use permits are treated. And those three options essentially were: one, they're automatically renewed and extended for a 36-month period, no matter what they said in the original temporary use permit. Option 2 is they have to apply for an extension under a type 1 process, and that can be extended for up to 36 months from the original date of approval. Or option 3 was they would have to reapply again for a new temporary use permit. And so the direction that the Planning Commission gave was option 2, to require somebody to apply for an extension. Apply for an extension under a type 1 process to allow them to operate for up to 36 months from the date of the original approval. And that's on page 32, 37 of the packet. You can see this change, which I believe I highlighted for you right there. And so that's the new language that was inserted into that. So again, that's just telling us what will happen with existing temporary use permits, and how, when this code becomes effective, how they can be extended. And that was the preference that Planning Commission expressed in the June meeting.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that reminder. I remember it was easy, slightly less easy, hard.
Right.
And so we went with a medium, number 2, something in the middle. Thank you for that. That brought it all back to me. We were very virtual that meeting. Now that I think about it, Commissioner Nutbrock.
Can we go back up to the top, the review process paragraph? If I understand right, the type 1 can approve a temporary permit up to 6 months. And between 6 months and a year, it's a type 2 process. So the initial approval is either up to 6 months or up to 1 year. And in the way this is written, we're sort of mixing the initial application and approval with the extension. So in that first paragraph, go to
You know what page?
yeah, I don't have page numbers.
I think this is, if you're still talking about the extensions.
No, I'm talking about up at the top under review process.
Okay.
And up there, in the first paragraph, it says, review of technically complete application for a temporary permit for uses that will exist not more than 6 months, up to a 1-year extension. I would take that extension out of there, because we're not talking about extensions here. We're talking about the initial application. And then you go down to the extension paragraph and say, okay, if you have a type 1, if you have a 6-month type 1 permit, you can get an extension for so long. And likewise, in paragraph 2 there, where it talks about for temporary use that will exist for then 1 year, I assume you meant to say more than 1 year. I would just say it's up to 1 year is what gets approved by the initial application. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that those changes are fine, and it's fine to leave the extensions out of the review process section.
Because you have
We can-
another whole section that talks about the extension process.
Mhm.
I view this as just the initial review process. You can submit up to 6 months to the type 1. If it's more than 6 and less than a year, it's a type 2 process.
Mhm.
And then under exemptions, I know I've asked this before, but we don't need to exempt farm stands or farmers markets. And why is that?
We don't need, say that again, I was taking a note on the
Well, somebody
last
wants to come
item.
in and set up a farmer's market for the whole summer, less than 6 months. Why does that not require a temporary permit, or why is it not an exemption?
I thought that we exempt, so those uses, I believe, are treated
Under something else.
under the street vendor
Yeah, so
code.
if it would be something that was a mobile vendor, a food cart or something like that, or although we don't have any identified at this point, farmer's market or some sort of vendor, group of vendors on public property, then it would fall under the vendor code, street vendor code, or no, I guess it's just vendor code now, change the name of it. And if it was on private property and it was going to be something potentially reoccurring, then I would agree with you that it would fall under some sort of temporary use if it's
If we
a,
had a street, if we had a food cart, food truck that wanted to come and set up on private property for an extended period of time, it would be here.
that's
If
correct.
they were setting up on public property temporarily,
It'd be under the vendor code and regulated under that. And that's consistent with what other jurisdictions have done. I've seen temporary use codes similar to ours used for food hubs with multiple food carts that are setting up on a semi-permanent basis in the past.
This is down in the approval criteria section. We don't say anything about temporary uses are not allowed in residential areas. Do you need to do that? Because I assume we don't intend temporary uses to be in residential areas. Or do we?
Well, I remember that this was brought up at a previous meeting, and I remember that there was also another comment by another planning commissioner that you might want something like a street fair or something in your neighborhood that you could apply for a temporary use permit for. And so I don't think we ever addressed that completely.
I thought we had some verbiage in here somewhere that it has to be, the temporary use has to be consistent or compatible with the underlying zone. So I think that was the mechanism that we were using to regulate that. You know, if it seems like it's something that's appropriate in a residential area, we can still allow that. If it's something that's too intense for a residential area, then it wouldn't fall under this code.
Yeah. So that's criteria A. Thank you for the reminder. I'm a little rusty myself.
Question on that then, is that saying that then somewhere else in the code we have that covered?
So yeah, under review criteria A, and this is on page 37 again, very top of page 37 of the packet.
Dennis, do you mean, is there a code that covers
Regarding the
someone
temporary
having a
use on
street?
private property?
That's what this is.
That's what this is.
I know.
That's what this whole code would do. And then the issue of having temporary uses in residential zones is addressed by that first
I
criterion
was
A.
thinking residential zones, yeah, that's what I was thinking. So that's covered under what?
It's addressed at the top of page 37. And it's criterion A, so it's the very first provision of this on this page. And it talks about compatibility and intensity and appearance with existing land uses that can be approved in the specific zoning district. The second sentence says the temporary use shall be one of the approved conditional or limited uses in the applicable zone. So you can't really establish even a temporary commercial use in a residential zone because most of the residential zones are going to prohibit those
Okay.
things.
Okay.
Jesse, can you scroll down just to the next page, I think, with that yellow highlighted text right there? In that subparagraph 3, in the first sentence, the underlined part will expire on the date specified in approval. That's redundant to what you've already set up in 1. Right?
I think that section 3 was the clarification for temporary use permits that are currently in existence and how they can be extended under this new code. Is that correct, Ethan?
Yeah.
Well, but how is that statement in 3 different from the number 1, which says temporary use permits automatically expire on the date specified in approval?
Well, because item 3 talks about extension of temporary use permits approved under item 1, as an example.
So for example, if you got a 1-year permit and then you decided you wanted to extend it another year or 2 following your initial approval, then this is the process that you'd go under. Or similarly, the temporary uses like the rockery would fall under this for extensions.
Well, I'm just questioning why we say will expire on dates specified in the approval, because you've already said that. And if it's important, you should have said it in 2 also,
Where do we already say that?
in 1 above. One.
I see what
One says temporary use permit will automatically expire on the date specified in approval.
Is 1 new items and 3 renewals or extensions? I think that's what that.
Well, 2 is a type 1 and 3 is a type 2.
I would assume that when you get an extension, there will be an approval with that will have an expiration date.
So it's just that using the language again is complicating it, redundant. But it reads nicely, it'll expire on the date, but maybe
But
extended.
it's important to say there, why aren't we saying it in paragraph 2 that deals with the 6-month ones?
I think I'd be fine removing that. I was using some, not to blame somebody else, I was using some language the attorney gave me, and I don't think that there's a particular reason to say it that way.
And then the other thing I always look at when you got 2 paragraphs that are saying similar things, why aren't they structured in parallel? Paragraph 2, you talk about it's valid up to 6 months, and you may add an additional 6 months. Where paragraph 3 talks about you can do an extension up to a total of 36 months, which includes the first 1 year. I would just structure those in a parallel fashion and say in paragraph 3, you can get an extension up to an additional 24 months. When you word those differently, I go and try to figure out why they're worded differently. What are you trying to say?
Well, one thought though on that is just that the initial approval could be up to 1 year, but it could be 1 month, it could be 1 week.
But regardless, you can get an extension for 24 months, right?
Yes, I think it would just
Or-
be item 3 less that first addition there.
Or up to a total of 36 months from the original approval.
Okay, I see. So the assumption is that somebody might have a 6-month approval or a 7-month approval and want to go for a full 36. So in the case of paragraph 2, the maximum anybody could do under that type 1 approval, initial type 1 approval, is a year.
Correct.
Okay, I see.
Any other comments from commissioners? Are we finding ourselves needing to make any adjustments here? I was just thinking if we do make an adjustment, I think the public hearing on this would push for 1 more month unless it had no material impact, if it was just for clarity. But I am just guessing.
You can make a motion, and unless I'm wrong, I was trying to type and listen at the same time, but I have 2 changes. One in 030, which would clarify the review process to remove the reference to extensions. And then the second would be in the expiration and extension section, which is 050, removing the clause in item 3 that references expiring on the date specified in the approval, because that's specified in item 1 above.
Right.
Did I miss anything. Okay.
So would that number 3 read a temporary use permit approved through type 2 process may be extended for up to?
That's
And
correct.
just strike out those other words.
That's correct.
So we could just move to approve that changes, and then you could open public hearing.
Yeah, okay. So I'd entertain a motion to incorporate Commissioner Nutbrock's suggestion, which Ethan is wordsmithing right now. But I think we should probably read maybe the final sentence for the record. So it's included in the motion, so it's very clear. And I don't know who's going to take that task on. I'm looking at
Well,
Ethan.
I'll take a stab at it. So your motion would be to recommend approval of the temporary use permit code update to the city council with the following modifications. 18.265.030 item 1 would read review of a technically complete application for a temporary use permit for a use that will exist not more than 6 months is subject to a type 1 process. And then the second modification would be in 18.265.050, which I just ran past. Sorry, 1 second. The second modification would be in 18.265.050, item 3 would read a temporary use permit approved through a type 2 process may be extended for up to a total of 36 months from the date of the original approval through a type 1 process.
Thanks, Ethan. Commissioner Nutbrock, what do you think?
Are we also going to make a change to the second paragraph of the review process?
To say may be extended once for up to an additional 6 calendar months and not reference valid for up to 6 calendar.
No, I'm talking about it up at the top of the review process.
Yeah, I think I read that one off already. Did I miss? Oh, you're saying item 2. That one doesn't have that one doesn't reference extensions, right?
Well,
There's a
it says
typo.
more
It's-
than 1 year.
Yeah, it's exist
Okay,
for
so
the-
that's the third change then. Yeah. So I don't know if you want me to restate everything again from the top.
No,
or-
just do item 2. I think we can hold
Okay.
it in memory.
And the third modification would be 18.265.030, review of a technically complete application for a temporary use permit for a use that will exist for up to 1 year is subject to a type 2 process.
Okay, I move we approve and send to the city
For
council. the
for
temporary
excuse
use
me,
permit.
for more than 1 year.
Adding the word more.
As presented as,
No, because the initial
It's more than-
application is for a temporary use permit for up to a year.
That's under type 1
That's-
though.
That's number 1.
And now we're talking about type 2, so it is for more than 1 year. Sorry.
I thought our premise here was that type 1, an application for type 1 process is for a permit up to 6 months. And the type 2 could approve a permit for up to a year. That's the initial application and approval.
Yes, we're confusing ourselves.
So type 1 is 6 months. Extended
Type
one
1
year.
is 6 months. Type 2 is 1 year. Type 1 extension is up to 1 year. Type 2 extension is up to 36 total months.
right.
So
Thanks, Dennis.
So in 18.265.030, section 2, there's no change there. Are we still streamlining?
It should have streamed
Or more than.
It's missing. We should have tweaked that.
It should say for up to 1 year.
For up to 1 year. Okay, so we have those 3 changes as read by Ethan.
4 changes.
I think there's 3, right?
I think 3.
3, yeah?
Yeah. So Commissioner Nutbrock, do you want to?
I don't mind going through it one more time. I know that takes time, but if
Yeah.
there's any clarity needed, I can
You know,
get it
we're,
right, hopefully.
I'm good.
Okay.
you know, if we were doing this virtually, like we would type it into the chat.
Just, I know, I'm just, I still think it's the phrase is more than 1 year, because it isn't a review of the complete, or temporary use that will exist for more than 1 year must be subject to the type 2 process. Is it? Or am
Well,
I-
that would be true.
You know, the ground
right?
rules are that a type 2 can only approve the initial permit up to 1 year.
Yeah.
Now, through an extension process, they get more time.
Yeah.
So it's up to rather than.
So the question is, how do we democratize that language so everyone can see it and agree on it?
Well,
You've read 1
if you
and
wanted
2.
to be even more clear about it, you could say that for the type 1 in provision 1, it's for up to 6 months. For provision 2, it's more than 6 months and up to 1 year. And then the extension of each of those would be up to 1 year for the type 1 and more than 1 year and up to 36 months
Type 2.
total. So, I mean, if you wanted to be even more clear about it, you could do that. I think that's what's confusing Paul a little bit, is because there's some overlap between the type 1 and the type 2, because the type 2 says for up to 1 year. Well, that includes anything from 0 to 1 year, whereas the type 1 includes from 0 to 6 months. So there's some overlap.
I'm
There.
comfortable with Ethan's update of that based on his what you've shared.
Do you guys have a good understanding of the language?
I think so.
And I don't object to Dennis's, but I was comfortable with the way that it was written, number 1. And number 2, I might add, up to 1 year or up to 36 months with extensions, and keep that part. So I could go either way on it.
Yeah, I think Commissioner
I think it's
Nutrock
clear
was
that way.
right. He was
Even
just
though
kind of
it's redundant.
streamlining.
Right.
Commissioner Nutrock, do you want to put your motion back out there? We kind of interrupted you when you were putting.
I move that we approve temporary use permit code for submittal to the city council with the 3 changes that we've discussed.
I'll second it.
Great. I have a motion in a second using unanimous consent. If there are no objections, this motion will carry. Any objection? Any discussion? Okay. This motion is approved. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you. Streamlining is always a good thing. I'm checking to see if anyone has joined us virtually, because we do not have anyone in the hall. Thoughts on opening up the public hearing for 1.6a? Now that we have those 3 items clarified. Although there's really no one here, but
There's nobody online.
yeah, we have one person online that Ethan knows.
I meant to mention this at the beginning, but we kind of jumped right in. But WSP has a new planner, Alec Egarola, and he's online just kind of observing the Planning Commission. And you'll see him probably in some future meetings. He's going to be helping me out with the city's comprehensive plan update that's due in 2025. So I just wanted to introduce him really quickly, but he won't have any comments or anything like that on what we're doing here tonight.
And do you catch his name?
Alec is his first name, A-L-E-C, Egurola, E-G-U-R-R-O-L-A.
Yeah, did you want to introduce him? Did you, more than what you've done, I mean?
I think you just did.
Yeah.
I think it just.
Yeah, no, I mean, like if he wanted to say something, but no.
Well, Alec, why don't you just turn your camera on if you're not too shy and just say hi to the commission. They're pretty easygoing, as you can tell.
Yeah, in for a penny, in for a pound, I always say.
Hi, I'm Alec. Let me get my camera turned on really quick.
There That would be very problematic for me. I'd be wearing like pajamas or something.
I'm not. I'm in Boise right now. I'm moving there in about a month, or early October. So I'm an hour ahead. So it's 8 o'clock here. But yeah, I'm Alec. Been with WSP about a month now. I think this week. And excited to help out with the City of the Center. Have a lot of experience with smaller cities, especially here in Idaho, that are growing really fast. I worked on the private development side, getting their applications through, and we're seeing crazy growth rates here. So escaping that and going over that direction. So I'll be excited to work with you guys.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Morning.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you, Alec. Thanks for
Yeah,
taking the time to
you as
introduce
well.
yourself, letting me put you on the spot.
Thank you,
Oh,
Alan.
that's fine. I'm happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. All right. Well, we've worked hard on 1.6a. If there are no objections from you guys, I'm just going to open up the public hearing. Although there's really no one here, I'll just open it up and then see if someone pops into the meeting here, virtual or in person. I'll give it like 10 seconds. I don't want to like jam it through because people should have a say. But I'm not seeing anyone, so I'm actually going to go ahead and close the public hearing on this. And we should move into 1.6b, parking code.
Can I ask a question here?
Sure.
Of parking code and home occupation, my sense was home occupation is a high priority. I'll apologize to Ethan, but I've got quite a few comments on parking. I would suggest if home occupation is a priority to get out of here tonight, we ought to talk that one next. It's up to you guys.
That works for me.
Well, let me ask you guys one thing. I think the intent here is if 1.6b parking code is like, I'm going to just say fully baked, if we have that, get it in the public hearing, that allows us to send it to city council. And so Commissioner Nutbrock or anyone else, do you foresee a deep discussion in parking code? Because we might be able to get those pieces kind of done. Okay.
That's why I was
Okay. All right. Well, I would entertain a motion to skip an item on the agenda.
I think you just do it. Get the chief agree.
I moved.
Yeah.
So moved.
So moved.
Yeah.
All right.
It doesn't require.
All right. I came from a place where it was a little bit more formal, but
That's never a bad thing, but
yeah,
Right.
yeah. I came. So I have a motion and a second. If there are no objections, we're not tabling 1.6b. We're just changing the order of the agenda. So yeah, I'm okay with that. 1.6c home occupation code. It's interesting as I was actually subject to this, and let me just say the person administrating was very polite because it was Jess. Was
it a difficult process?
It was brutal. I mean, Jess. I felt like the FBI was raiding. No, I'm kidding. Actually, it's interesting because you want to do things by the book, but in the end, there's just a lot of people on computers living on Zoom and sometimes Google Meet. But should we just maybe, Ethan, if we have you kind of open up, maybe like a high level on the home occupation code, what the intent was. I know there was something about 59% of businesses have gone from the office to home. That actually happened to me because my office in town had 3 people in it and everyone scattered for the pandemic. And I was just sitting in my newly extended man cave, paying nearing $1,000 a month for just me to not have my adult children make noise. So I just moved home. So anyway.
And actually this was a Brian and Jesse led endeavor. So I'll steal Ethan's thunder here and I'll present this one. So this is something that came up shortly after I started here and sort of came up in conjunction with the pandemic, as you mentioned, driving more people to be working from home, and also coincided with an update to the city and state business licensing process, whereas when someone applies for a state business license, they can also get their center license, and then if they say that they're working from home, it kicks them into this potential home occupancy permit. And currently, our process requires anyone that uses their home address for a business address. So if you're working for another company, but you're just working remotely, then you're exempt from the current code and from the proposed code. But if you own your own business and are working from your home, currently you have to go through a type 1 or type 2 process, which requires submittal of information, staff review. If you're in an HOA, it kicks you up to that type 2 review, where then there's noticing of your neighbors. And so staff's proposal is to revise this code to streamline the process, primarily for those who have no impact on the neighborhoods. So the main objectives of this were, one, to eliminate that type 2 review process. If you're not exempt, but you are in an HOA, we're putting it on the applicant to verify that they're complying with their HOA CC&Rs, and the city, I don't believe, should be inserting ourselves in that process necessarily. We're also exempting uses that don't impact the surrounding neighborhood, such as noise, light, traffic from either employees that don't live on the property or customers coming to the property. If you don't have any of those, no signs, no meetings, etc. If you're just working from your home office, under this proposal, you'd be exempt. And then also, if you do have some sort of traffic impacts, limiting that to under this code to 1 PM peak hour trip. So, if you have one employee or you have, occasional meetings, but if you have a bunch more than that, then it's probably maybe not appropriate for a home occupation use. So just clarifying that a little bit. So again, the intent here is to reduce the burden on those that are choosing to work from home, and to minimize the use of both staff and small businesses' time and resources.
I think it also, in addition to the bullets, I think there was a question on there too about shipments. If you were going to be receiving shipment, you might have said that and I didn't hear it, but
no, I didn't actually address that. But the goal there is basically, if you're receiving shipments through its typical delivery service that's already coming through neighborhoods, the postal service, UPS, FedEx, something like that, then again, you're exempt. If you're having, some sort of freight delivery or something, then that would take you into potentially that limit of 1 PM peak hour trip. And if you're having more than that, then again, maybe not appropriate for a home occupation use in a residential area. Another thing that I forgot to add is that we have currently 61 businesses with pending home occupation review, and we've been kind of holding on to those, knowing that this process was in the works, and that's why we're trying to kind of get it through and up to council as quickly as possible, because our plan is to, a lot of these, I believe, will be exempt. So we actually polled those 61 people. We've had 29 people respond, and of them, 28 would be exempt. So I think,
How many total do you have?
we have 61 that are pending review. When we reached out, 29 responded, and of them, only 1 would have to go through the process as proposed. So again, it'll really minimize the need for just to spend a bunch of time processing these. It'll minimize the need for these businesses to pay a couple $100 fee. So the goal here is, again, being business friendly and improving efficiency. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I would just open it up to anyone with questions. I know Commissioner Nutbrock, you had some points to mention. Yeah, or anyone. I can open up to anyone. And I think with this one too, from a procedural standpoint, I'll probably facilitate the discussion, but I may abstain from any votes on it, just because I am one of those people that were surveyed.
May I just ask, I don't quite understand what you mean, 1 PM peak hour trip.
So the way that our traffic impacts are measured here in the city in our code is a PM peak hour trip. There's different ways to do it, but our code references PM peak hour trips, so we're trying to be consistent with that. And basically that's if you have 1 trip that's coming to your location in the afternoon, basically, that for whatever reason, was the one that we picked. I've seen other jurisdictions use like average daily trips or something like that, number of trips per day.
How
But
often?
exactly. So
coming
if
in.
basically the layman's way to think about it is if you have, someone that's coming or going from your property one more time in the afternoon than they otherwise would be for just a standard house. So if you have a delivery coming, once every afternoon, or you have an employee that's leaving every afternoon that, is coming on site and then leaving site, or if you have, meetings or clients coming more than, one time in the afternoon, then again, if exceeding that one would kick you into potentially a different sort of process other than home occupation.
And so your opinion would be if it was somebody had 2 or 3, then that wouldn't be conducive to a home occupation.
Right. So when we evaluate the traffic impacts for residential, I believe it's 1 p.m. peak hour that the sort of Institute of Traffic Engineers standard. They look at how many trips, just like the parking code, same group, how many trips are generated by different uses, and generally your average residential use is 1 p.m. peak hour trip. So if you can double that under this and get up to 2 p.m. peak hour trips, but if you have more impact because you're running a business from your home, then 2 p.m. peak hour trips, 1 for the standard house and then 1 for your home occupation, then
So this is
one additional p.m. peak hour trip. Yes.
Does this indicate that basically there's, for a home occupation, there's one individual involved, not one person who may have a staff person?
So under the exemptions, if basically everyone that's an employee of the business already lives at the house, then that would be under this exemption criteria.
Who lives at the house, you said?
Right. So if you're a family running a family business, but everyone that's working for the business already lives at the house, then you're exempt. But if you don't and you have a employee that's coming, then again, I think it's limited to one employee, one additional employee, non-resident employee.
But in that regard, if you have someone there and you needed to send them out to do a task or deliver something to the attorney, and then they come back, could they not be gone a couple of times in the afternoon?
Well, again, if you're living there, you can come and go as you please. And we're talking averages here.
The employee who's working for the owner who lives on the property.
Who would not live on the property.
That's right.
Yeah.
The person who works for the owner who lives on the property and they're sent out to go to the mailbox or go to the post office or go to someplace. They may do that. Can they not do that 2 or 3 times a day, that individual?
Yeah, no, they can. So this is all, we're talking averages here. So it's an average of 1 8 p.m. peak hour trips. Maybe one day they're coming and going several times. Maybe one day they're staying there all afternoon. But the limitations are a single non-resident employee and then this 1 average daily trip, PM peak hour trip to account for not only employees but deliveries and other traffic generation.
That seems a little tight to me. If you have someone who's working for you, I would think there's got to be opportunities. They're going to be gone every day, potentially once or twice, potentially going out and doing something on behalf of the business owner. What's the downside if
They just wouldn't fall under the exemption.
Okay, so then what do they do?
They would just be run through the review process to make sure it isn't going to, I guess,
Okay,
be above what they
So the exemption is
so you
no.
pop them up to a review process that says, this is what I anticipate happening. They're going to be gone a couple times a day, coming back. And you're going to go through a review process to approve that then?
Well, so the exemption would be if you're not adding any traffic impacts, then you're exempt. If you are adding traffic impacts by having a non-resident employee or deliveries or something of that nature, then you would still be under that type 1 process. So, and your point's well taken, but I think it's generally and broadly speaking, if 1 employee equals 1 average PM peak hour trip. Or if you have regular deliveries, that could potentially add, so if you have a non-resident employee and a bunch of deliveries, you might be exceeding the PM peak hour trip. Or if you have more than 1 employee, which again, our code separately does not allow.
These 61 that are pending review, are those all category 1? I mean.
Well, we only know of the 29 that responded, because we sent a poll saying, hey, do you have any of these sort of uses? Do you generate any traffic? Do you have any resident employees? Do you have signs? So of those 29 that responded, one said, yes, I have some sort of impact, and the other 28 said, no, I don't. So they would fall under this new
So if
exemption
he says I have
criteria.
some kind of impact, and he's going to come back to you and ask for
Then he has to come with a type 1
a type
submittal.
1 process.
Exactly.
Okay.
So how, if somebody is applying for an exemption, is that a type 1 process?
It's essentially, it would just be a
no
judgment.
process. Yeah.
Yeah,
No process.
when they apply through the DOR, it actually asks, do you have an employee? Do you make sound? Do you have, it goes through these questions.
We can put these criteria into the system.
So if they make an application and they meet they don't exceed any of the exemption criteria, then it's just approved. There's no process.
Exactly.
But is there a permit issued?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's technically a license.
It's a business license.
It's a home occupation license.
Through the state.
Yeah.
And they get that license through the state. They don't get through the city.
No, it's through the city.
So-
So you have to have a state license, and then you have to have a city license.
Oh, in this situation, the city also issues a license.
Regardless, if you have a business in the city, you have to have a
So it's
city.
a home occupation license?
I thought that, my understanding that the state issues the license and the city only gets involved if there's a deviation. That's not true?
No, so there's a state business license, and then our system is the state integrates with the city. So if you say I'm doing business in La Center and I have a La Center address, then you get a city business license as well. It's all through the same state system, so it seems sort of seamless to the end user, but they are getting both a state and a city business.
So they come into the city and get a license?
No, it's all through the state online system.
Yeah,
That's what because I was told differently from Maria, that's the.
It used to be you'd have to come in
It's done
separately, but
online.
in the last
Yeah.
year or so,
it's been like 2 years, I
2
think.
years. Okay.
I think it's been 2 years because I have to do this for my company, but so you do it at the state, and then the minute you put in the center address, it's almost like another array of questions shows up, and it starts going through.
That process will ask these exemption questions.
Exactly. And then if they answer yes, then it'll come to us and we'll say, okay, here's the process you got to go through. And if they say no, then it just sort of automatically gets approved. They get their city business license as well.
Okay, so.
I forgot what it's called, but it's like you get like the state license, and then there's like a La Center
Endorsement,
endorsement. Thank you. Yeah. And before you just used to like pay money and just fill out a really simple form and you would get it. So now it's a little bit
Or
more.
you wouldn't, many people wouldn't.
Well, this is all based on your honor.
Yeah,
You know,
as is everything.
yeah. So you're trusting that they're not somehow. I'm not sure if there's a financial cost, additional cost is or not.
It's nominal.
To get to a type 1.
I think it's what, $100 or something for it.
160, 140, we just updated it, so I forget.
And what does a basic one cost?
The license is 50,
Okay, so it'd be another $100, $150.
and that would be on top of the 50.
Okay,
So it'd be 50 plus the review fee,
Okay.
because that's for staff.
okay, gotcha. So,
So I assume before this goes to the city council, we put in the standard structure.
Legislative edit, is that what you mean?
Well, no, the standard paragraph numbering scheme. This doesn't do that. And what, is there some reason the first paragraph was deleted? Sort of a definition.
Yeah, I was just joking with Jess that we would have to put our heads together to remember why we did that. Because when I was
So I
preparing
do
for this
remember-
meeting, I was like, I can't remember why we did that. So
So although, together, my mic wasn't on. So although together, Brian and I put the code together, WSP, I don't know if it was Ethan, I can't remember. They did pull out like all the other cities kind of around us, their home occupation code, and that language is just not used. We were the only ones that tried to do some weird specification there, because it's assumed if your home is your business.
I guess my part I liked in there was to talk about it's an economic enterprise. Look
Yeah.
at our definition says home occupation is an occupation in a home. Well, that doesn't make any sense. You look at Ridgefield, they say it's a business use conducted in a home. So I would think we need to update our definition to say it's a business enterprise or it's a business in a home, something like Ridgefield did, or include that here as a applicability paragraph.
Well, so the reason that we suggested this be deleted is because there's already a definition in 1840, so we didn't think,
I contend that definition is inadequate.
right.
And so I would have no problem updating that definition to be clear that a home occupation is a business use or an enterprise use in a home, rather than just saying home occupation shall mean an occupation in a home.
Yeah, the main point, or one of the main points though, is that this isn't the place for definitions, 1840s.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we can update 1840 as you suggest, but we just want to remove the
Because,
definition.
the idea of it being an economic enterprise or a business avoids those kind of things that Brian was talking about, that if you're just got a home office, if you're working for a company, that's not a business or an economic enterprise. So I thought that distinction was important.
Oh, I see. In the first sentence, the first paragraph.
It's not on here.
And our definition literally says, home occupation shall mean an occupation, profession, or craft secondary to the use of the residential. I think that'd be a lot stronger if it said a business enterprise or a.
So maybe take the second sentence of that, what was 18-270-10, a home occupation is an economic enterprise that includes the use of a dwelling, and stick that in the definition section. Okay.
And then I have the applicability paragraph. I have read this 100 times. I can't figure it out. I think what you want to say is a planning director or designee shall review requests for home occupation uses listed in this section is a type 1 review consistent with such and such, period. And then you say uses which do not impact these things are eligible for an exemption. That whole long sentence is a huge run-on. We'll go up, yes. It's under applicability. So I wasn't sure what you were trying to say here.
A1 here.
Yeah. So I would put a period after 080 there, strike provide that, and then just, so the first paragraph says it's a type 1 process. The second paragraph says
Sentence.
uses which do not generate all these things are eligible for exemption. And then those exemptions are listed down below. So what am I missing there that you were trying to say?
I think that's basically, it's just breaking that sentence up into two sentences.
I think it's just 3 people working on something. It can get a little messy. Yeah, I'm trying to read it how you're saying.
So just said, planning director designee shall review requests for home occupation uses listed in this section is a type 1 review process consistent with 1830-08.
Although it could be so it can't be quoted out of context, when you legalese where you slam in the provided so that.
Well, and we do
You can't
detail
read.
exemptions below, so it might even be possible if you really want to streamline things to just end at the LMC 1830-080 period, and then exemptions are talked about in section B.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure you need to list all those, list some of the exemptions that are eligible. I'm just saying that exemptions are available under paragraph such and such.
Because it's clearly outlined in 1830-080.
So get rid of what's in the parentheses there. Just say uses that do not generate impacts outside of the dwelling are exempt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
accordance
okay.
with the paragraph where those are listed.
Okay. Any comments from anyone else on that? Thoughts?
Makes sense.
I concur.
I think that's
I don't
fine.
know if you need to say something about, well, we'll get to that when we get down And then the second paragraph there says, home occupation examples, but not limited to, require a type 1 review.
It should say
So
include.
is that exact? And that those kinds of occupations aren't eligible for an exemption?
That's correct.
That's why we use the word example.
I think there's,
So
if
if
I
I'm
can
an
maybe,
artist, I'm not eligible for an exemption even though I meet all the exemption criteria.
I think that heading could maybe just go away, because up above in the sentence that we just changed under applicability, it would say planning director designation shall request for home occupation uses listed in sections type 1 review consistent with LCMC 1830-080, and then you have the list. I don't even think you need, if you want to keep that just to show that those are examples, you can say home occupations including but not limited to,
That's what I would prefer.
and then just have that list but eliminate requiring type 1, because it's that type 1 is also referenced up above.
It seems to me that almost all of the occupations listed under A would be potentially able to get an exemption.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure why those specific
Yeah.
occupations would not be eligible.
I can't-
Well,
An
and
illustrator,
not
a
to
writer.
jump in here and take
Go
over
for
too
it.
much, but that's, I think, why maybe it was me that suggested putting that language up above that talks about the exemptions and the impacts, because if you just read this list and say, and it says you've got to go get a type 1 permit in isolation, and then that's counter to the purpose of this code update, which is to exempt uses that don't have an
Is there a
impact.
reason we need to list examples?
Everyone else did it.
Yeah.
Everyone else listed.
What is the purpose?
I personally would be fine with leaving it. I think the only purpose would be if we kept the things like a family daycare home. You're not going to be able to meet the exemption. You obviously have people going to the location.
But won't that be caught and communicated during the exemption?
Yeah,
process?
that's
It
why I'm
doesn't
like-
need to
Or
be spelled
typical
out.
exemptions are typical occupation of businesses that are not exempt and require a code type 1 are the,
No, but you don't know.
Daycare.
You don't know until they apply.
well, daycare we don't. They're saying daycare for sure is one.
Yeah.
I'm saying if there's a couple, you could say these are not, others.
You know, I've always had an issue with a list that say, examples, but not limited to. I mean, it's not, if it's not all inclusive, what's the purpose of having it there?
And then you can almost always have someone that like is disqualified because they're like a web developer with a bunch of people coming over, or so I think in the effort to streamline things, I think Commissioner Uprock brings up a good point. Any other?
Well, because this is suggesting that a web developer or a writer would automatically need a type 1 review and would in no way be able to be exempt, whereas I don't see why a web developer would create noise, light, fumes, deliveries, exterior improvements. So I think that would be a poor example of somebody who definitely needs a type 1 review in many of those examples. So yes, I agree.
So if I
Most of them.
understand,
Most of them
being
would
said-
probably be exempt,
sorry,
I would hope so.
right?
so if I understand what you're saying correctly, we would eliminate the list of examples completely,
Well,
gone,
The daycare ones.
which would then raise a question of what's type 1, what requires what type 1 and what doesn't. And it sounds like to me it's impact versus not. If you have no impact, it's exempt. If you have an impact, you have to go get a type 1
Yes.
permit. Doesn't matter what type of business it is.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
And if you,
I don't write that, but-
yeah.
That's your intent here, right?
And then the process is triggered by just getting a business license. And so it like everyone gets funneled, and then you have that, that survey quickly figures out who needs to do
The
type
system-
1.
The system forces you to go that way. State systems forces you that way.
Because I know I tried to,
How you answer the questions.
yeah, and I remember too, I was like, I'm just a guy on a computer, so I just put in the PO box to begin with, and it was like, no, you can't do that. He's like, you need a real address. I'm like, oh, okay, and I just put in the home address, and yeah.
So one question would be about, is there a level of impacts that are so great that we need to call them out, or is everything going to be a type 1? For
I think
instance,
it's either nothing or type 1, and then in section C, we talk about sort of the limitations on your impacts as a type 1. So
if you go above the levels in C, then you can't get a home occupation permit. You got to go be in a commercial zone or an industrial zone.
As an example, that in A there where it talks about school of special education and limited to 4 people, that would be one to move down to C. That's a specific criteria that somebody's decided is the threshold.
If you exceed the exemptions listed in B, then you go into a type 1. And if you exceed the additional limitations in C, then you are disqualified from the home occupation status. Would that be correct?
I think if you wanted to give some clarity in the code too, it could be something, and I think we might have done it okay, but something to the effect of like certain low impact home occupations could be exempted fairly easily or something like that. I'd have to look back up at the code above, as opposed to examples, I guess.
Can we move to exemptions?
sure.
So paragraph B, it says home occupations which do not create. List those 5 things. The first one is no increase in traffic. So you're saying which do not create no increase in traffic. That sounds like a double negative to me. Which do not create no increase. And then
Or say
likewise,
any increase.
and then likewise,
Yeah.
Some double negatives are happening.
Yeah.
and then likewise with 4,
Yeah.
do not create no employees. And then 3, use of home to meet clients, customers, business-related associates, and the like. The term the like, is that a legal term that we are using?
Very.
This is all the vetted by
I didn't want someone to be like, well, it's not a client, a customer, or a business-related associate. It's an occupation person.
It could be non-residents of the home, use of the home to meet with clients, customers. Yeah,
I think no matter what, business-related associates should pretty much cover it.
you're probably right on that. Commissioner Nutbrock, does that cover the concern there and the moving it?
And then I still think there needs to be some explanation for how an exemption is approved. Or are we just going to trust it? I'm just uncomfortable. We say how.
Well, if it's exempt, then there'd be no approval process. And if someone falsifies and says, they don't have any impacts, and it turns out they do, then that would fall under code enforcement.
Well, but there is a process that you describe for exemption. They have to go to the DOR and fill this out, and they still get a business, a center endorsement, right, for a business license? So
Correct.
there's a process there.
I think that's why we just said, but still are required to obtain a business license.
Yeah, and we have a whole business license section of the code as well.
If that works, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine. Do we want to reference the LCMC paragraph there for business license?
We could, yeah.
Dennis, you're hired.
That's fine.
Anything else, Commissioner Nutbrock, on that?
And then down in C, the first sentence, addition to the use limitations applicable to zoning district in which located, all home occupations shall be subject to the following limitations. And other uses which fit the following criteria. Now, so are there other uses other than home occupation that these criteria apply to? I don't understand the other uses.
Probably wrote that in 2009.
This is about home occupation use, and then you bring up other uses.
So
Yeah,
maybe
that is
just
kind of a word soup there. I think the intent there, as far as I understand it, is there's some zones in the city where you can have either a residential use or a business use. CRB, is that what I'm totally spacing on my zoning?
Well, that's it.
Or RO,
RP.
RP, sorry.
That's what I'm looking for, RP. So you could have a residence there with the home occupation in it, or if you're exceeding, your underlying zoning district, you could potentially do a business in that location as well, but you wouldn't fall under this home occupation code at that time. So I think that's what they were trying to get to there.
But this is saying other uses which fit the following criteria may obtain a home occupation permit.
So in C, we just maybe need to streamline the language there.
Well, at least get rid of other uses.
Other uses would do it.
This is other uses which fit the limitations.
The following use limitations.
That's a little confusing. I'm not sure what's that's referencing.
So in addition to the limited limitations applicable to the zoning district in which located, all home occupations shall be subject to the following use limitations. Scratch other uses. Which, I don't know what I was saying here. Which fit the following limitations.
And I would just put period there.
Yeah.
And then one of those, that sub-list, number 7, one sign, 2 square feet in dimensions shall be permitted. That is significantly smaller than the signs we already allow in the residential zone, which is 6 square feet. So I don't know if there's.
No, so we should be consistent with our sign code.
Although in that instance, are you talking about putting the 2 square foot sign on a house versus like the school, which happens to fall in residential zoning though?
No, we have in the residential zone, there's a specific provision for either a permanent sign or a permanent sign of 6 square feet.
For home occupation.
It doesn't say that, but I think
Within the residential.
That was the intent of it.
And they're up in number 3, it mentions no alteration to the character or exterior thereof as a dwelling. And I don't know if that clashes with the sign concept or not.
Yeah, I think the sign would have to be not attached to the structure. It'd have to be its own little freestanding sign.
And then if, going back up to the list of examples, I think we decided we're going to get rid of all those. It may be that there is one there that looks like B or number 10, school of special education class, I see 4 people.
Yeah, so we'll move that down to subsection C.
Oh, and then in E, you say the applicant or applicants use a possessive form of applicants, assuming just plural applicants.
Applicant or applicant representative.
Oh,
Yeah.
And that's because that's how they
yeah, that's
will
right.
process it.
That's,
Yep.
yep, I didn't read far enough to get scratch out.
Are you guys just going to go back and look at the sign
Yeah, so
Measurement.
we'll, in section 7 there, we'll say one sign shall be permitted consistent with, and then we'll reference the sign code chapter.
That work for you guys?
Perfect.
And I think that we've figured out. Anything else, Commissioner Nutbrock?
It's wonderful.
Excellent. Any thoughts, comments from other commissioners?
If we can't get approval on this tonight, which I think it looks like we're able to, if not, then are these folks, these 61, are they just held in abeyance?
Yeah, that's what we've communicated
And
with them, that we're
But they're not in
undertaking.
the cease and desist category.
No, we're just kind of letting them hang out
Right.
unpending.
Grandfathered
We have been
in.
contacted by one applicant that said that they needed a city business license for some software licensing. And so we told them, hey, this is when we anticipate getting this process through, or you can go through the existing type 1 process. They haven't responded to either of those options yet. But,
Live in an HOA, so.
oh, they'd be a type 2 then.
Changes. We could do that.
Or I would suggest
Can you clarify once more time, what is type 1, what is type 2? You think?
So under the existing code, type 1
Glad we
is
pointed these things out.
impacts but not an
Glad
HOA.
we pointed those things out.
And type 2 is you're in an HOA, so we have to notify your neighbors too, in addition.
Okay, so it's different than the type 1 and type 2 of the business of the.
Yeah, it's its own special type 2, so we're totally eliminating that in this proposed revision.
But at the same time, I actually was able to get my license. It wasn't withheld, but I've also applied at the.
But you have one.
Yeah, I had one, I guess 4 or 5 years running. And so,
That might be why.
yeah, so there was just a change. So I changed it, and the way it was set up, I don't think I was allowed to change like the location. I basically had to add a location and then almost to the effect of deleting a location. It almost seemed like that. Like I added a location and then ended a location.
Yeah, I think for you, it doesn't.
It doesn't do
give you
that.
anything.
Oh, that's true, because you don't have that original location.
That'd be existing.
Yeah, because I was at the Heritage.
Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Ethan and Brian, based on what we've been discussing here about these changes, are you both comfortable at this point to make those changes in accordance with what we have discussed here, so that we could, and as we did on 1B, 16A, approve that? Or do you feel like you need to go through and update it and then come back to us? And Commissioner Nutbrock indicated perhaps we could have between now and next meeting a workshop or something to go over that and wrestle through that. Or are you comfortable with the changes that have been described in order so that we would feel comfortable to proceed?
I think I've been keeping pretty good notes here on all the changes, and we could.
Also,
About our official planner, how do you feel? He's kind of.
I mean, it's a lot, but Brian's been keeping good notes. And so I guess the question would be how to reflect this in the record and make a motion and all that stuff if you want to approve it.
You can do something. Go ahead.
no alternative, it's just call a special session. A week or whatever.
I could go type all these up real quick while Ethan's hashing through parking code. We could bring it back for.
But then you'll miss the.
Yes,
That
you
would
don't
be a
know.
shame.
Let me
That
make
was a
a
side benefit.
let me make a suggestion. Commissioner Nutbrock, you brought up some good things. They were really streamlining and some grammar and structure things. There's nothing that was like a major legal change that we're doing. Like for example, removing examples. We didn't allow a certain business in or out. So I don't know. I don't want to speak for the whole, but I think I would be comfortable with you guys taking it away and bringing it back to us. But you do a motion, Commissioner Nutbrock, where you just outline the 4 changes, and I doubt you guys will fail us. Unless you need to dig deeper into that, but I didn't think you had any more comments.
Eliminating the specific occupations examples was probably the most important change, maybe I felt,
I do.
as long as that's done.
And I could
Appropriately,
run
I-
through the changes based on my notes just to and get a head nod. Okay, so the first change I have is the definition. We are continuing to remove it as proposed here, but we will update in the definition section to include that second sentence there discussing an economic enterprise. In section A1 applicability, we are after LMC 18.30.080, we're adding a period and striking the rest of that sentence. We're adding a period after 13.80. We're striking provided that and beginning a new sentence with uses which do not generate impacts, and we're eliminating examples of those impacts in the parentheses there. Outside of the dwelling unit are exempt and not required to obtain a home occupation permit as detailed. And then the remaining strike through stands. In section 2, we're getting rid of all that, all the examples, except for D, which is going to be moved down into subsection C. Exemptions, section B there, we will add to the end there, still required to obtain a business license per La Center Municipal Code 5.05. To eliminate double negatives, section 1 there would be any increase in traffic. And section 4 would be any employees outside the home who reside in the dwelling, who do not reside in the dwelling. Do not create any of the following impacts. This is confusing.
But it's tricky to do it on the fly, but so far so good.
I think it would just say employees outside of those who reside in the dwelling.
Any employees who do not reside in the dwelling. So it'll say section 4 will be any employees who do not reside in the dwelling. Okay, and then section C, that first sentence there, we will end it after limitations. So it'll read, in addition to the use limitations applicable in the zoning district in which located, all home occupations shall be subject to the following use limitations, period. The remainder of that sentence will be stricken, and then it'll continue if a home occupation permit is granted, but occupant fails to consistently comply, and continues on there with the existing language. And then in subsection 7, regarding signs, we will say one sign shall be permitted consistent with the sign code, and we'll reference that unless just you have that off the top of your head here.
860.
Consistent with La Center Municipal Code Chapter 8.60. And I think that is all of the changes.
Let me ask what, again, we're changing at the beginning there, we're going to be talking about a home enterprise as part of that description, correct?
Yeah, so we will be moving the home economic enterprise sentence, the second sentence in that section, up to the definitions section.
So if we do that, within the code though, home occupation is used several times. And we somehow, do we need to change it, home occupation, all the way through to home enterprise? Or can we do something at the beginning?
Yeah, so we will
that says-
define home occupations as an economic
There you go.
enterprise. Yeah.
Very good, very good.
Commissioner Nutbrock, did they cover your?
Perfect. Yeah, I'm good with it.
I would,
I have one.
There's one
Yeah.
other thing that I caught, and I'm not a planning commissioner, but I'm just raising this issue. So under applicability, where we have the long list of uses that we struck, the paragraph or the first sentence, the only sentence now in this paragraph will say the planning director or designee shall review requests for home occupation uses listed in this section as a type 1 review, but there's no list. So maybe it just says home
Good catch.
occupation uses shall review home occupation uses as a type 1 review.
That's why I have the list.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah,
catch.
we would have,
Well,
There you go.
Yeah,
you would have
good
left
catch
us
on that.
hanging.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
think correct me if I'm wrong, guys, we were going to retain D, but also I thought maybe we were going to retain C for some reason. Was that correct or incorrect?
Yeah, so we will
In
be
the list of
retaining
examples.
subsection C and D.
C and D will move
But-
to limitations.
Not just D, but also C.
So it'll go A, applicability, subsection 1 will remain, subsection 2, A2 will go away, and then it'll be section B, section C, section D. So
I think what Commissioner Smith is saying is we're adding D, school special education, who's blah, 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 is going to the limitation section.
Mm.
He's saying, should we also move C?
Correct.
Oh,
That
okay.
that
Since
C.
it is,
which is
The
what
family
family
daycare
daycares?
house.
Yes, okay.
That's
I
not a
don't know how either
limitation,
one of
though,
those-
is it?
he's asking how,
Well, I would say that we stick with that class size of 4 people, may not exceed 4 people, and we just say school or special education whose class size may not exceed 4 people at a given time, and that's one of your exemptions or limitations in section C.
family daycare.
What's that? That'd be a type one.
What's I mean, that's
Or should we just remove that, like that's not
I-
a thing?
Type one.
maybe that just falls under school or special education.
Well, I don't think you need family daycare because there's a whole another section of 18-70 that deals with,
So can we do that in a residential zone?
yeah.
Okay, so never mind.
So is the school.
Okay, thank you.
It's covered elsewhere.
The school section, is that school or special?
Yeah, it should say school or.
Okay, that makes sense.
School of special education.
Yeah. I
Well,
don't know
I
what
wonder
that
if
is.
It should say school or
Yeah.
special.
That makes more sense.
Did you want to do a motion? Any thoughts from anyone else?
I'm good.
I move that we approve for submittal to the city council 18270.010 home occupation with the changes as we discussed.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. I'm going to have a roll call vote if there's no discussion, because I'm going to abstain.
You already got it.
I did. I just don't want Jess like raiding my home with her troops.
All right, planning commissioner Duffrock,
All right,
planning commissioner Hill,
Yes.
planning commissioner Alpachari,
Abstain.
planning commissioner Smith,
Aye.
planning commissioner Keeler. Sorry.
Aye.
And planning commissioner alternate Jones.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Great, so we'll look for those changes.
so you're gonna try to get done with the city council.
So now you need to.
It won't be on tomorrow's agenda, but it'll be on the second
Public
meeting in
hearing.
August.
That's right. You need public hearing now.
Yeah, so with the public hearing on that,
7:57. You need to open that up.
we can open it up just with the understanding that whoever's been here is tracking the changes.
If you're interested, they've been watching, listening.
Yes, there might be some ghosts in the room or something. Yeah, we can, I mean, we're in agreement here. We didn't have a fantastic attendance by the public, but we could open up the public hearing and that just gets us further along in the process. You guys okay with that?
Well, I have to do it. It's official. You have no choice.
All right. So home occupation code 1.6C, I am going to open up the public hearing. Anyone who's interested in making a comment, I'm assuming we didn't have any written comments on that. All right. I'm just checking online just to democratize the process. I'm seeing no one. So I'm just going to close the public hearing with no comments, which allows us to go into 1.6B parking code. Parking standards, August memo. Just going to open that up. I think Commissioner Nutbrock, you had some comments here as well. Any thoughts from?
I thought we had worked through all the comments, but
Yeah, and I think we had a working session too. We had a working session with Commissioner Keeler, or was that?
Not during this last.
It was
month and a
before.
half.
Yeah, it was before that, and it kicked off a lot of the parking discussion, which was brought in. But Commissioner Nutbrock wanted me to make sure that I was including other voices here. So, any other thoughts on parking?
Okay, I guess I want to apologize. Maybe I wasn't giving these previous versions a thorough enough read, but I had this time to go through it in detail and look at across the whole code. When I look at these, I'm trying to make sure we're being consistent across everything. So that's a lot of my comments here. If you want, we can just start with the median density, the order that's listed, and just go through it that way.
Do you want me to pull up your document? Is that
No,
helpful for you?
we don't need that one yet.
Okay, just let me know. Okay.
Yeah, I just go to the order that Ethan has them in his staff report. Start with median density code 18140.
Also, Commissioner Nutbrock, how, not to put you on the spot, but how many things do you have? Because I'm going to also offer up Commissioner Keeler's expertise in another working session. If you think, you said you felt you had more time to review, so if it's going to be very thorough.
There's quite a few here.
There's quite a few, like 5, 10, a dozen. I'm going to maybe suggest, and Commissioner Keeler, if your schedule is tight, and Ethan, I'd love your input on this, is maybe we get another pass through where we're looking at red lines. Yeah, maybe we're reviewing red line as opposed to discussion.
Yeah, that's fine with us, and I think that's probably the most efficient way to do it. And then that allows for a little bit more discussion in the workshop setting, and we can report back to you what the.
Right. And I don't think we had like an impending deadline to have that to City Council. We have two things that went into public hearing tonight and are okay. And we could probably, if we need to punt one more month on that, I think it would be fine. Okay.
are we saying that they're going to look at what Commissioner Nutbrock has suggested and incorporate that for us to take a look at?
Incorporate
As we agreed.
Yeah, and Commissioner Keeler kind of went, through that work group, so it'll still be fresh in his mind and
Sort of.
yeah.
Well, I was the sole virtual attendee, so a lot of it, some comments I was not able to track, but
That's
will reinvigorate my study of the
It'd
parking
be
code.
nice if we could do that face to face.
Yes.
Sometime when you're out here.
This will be a special session or a workshop.
It's like a working group and it allows them to kind of dig in without a quorum to just more chat about things.
If we work around one of the conference rooms upstairs or something, it'd be much easier, a lot better.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So
And again, I apologize.
Oh, no.
you know what? It's better to get it done right? Do it right the first time? There's some saying on that. I'm just going back to the agenda. And so if we're going to do a working session on that, we would need a motion to table 1.6b.
Do we still want to open the public hearing since we did have a pre-phoned in comment
And then you just extend it to the next.
Right.
and
So
continue the hearing?
we could do that.
You could even, I mean, it's a legislative item. It doesn't really matter, but you could even open it and close it because you can do that any number of times with a code update.
Sure.
But
And we're just taking in the public comment. I mean, it's all right. So let's do that. So we've agreed internally. We'll just do a working session between Commissioner Keeler and Commissioner Nutbrock to just really refine some of the things or Commissioner Nutbrock that you found. So at this time, then I'm going to go ahead and open up public comment for item 1.6b on the agenda, which is parking code. I don't think virtually we have Anyone in attendance? And you said you had one recorded comment?
I'm not sure where we're going to public comment because we have not approved.
I think we just want to accept the comment before we move forward with any more revisions.
Even though we haven't. Okay.
On
Yeah.
what's done.
Because we could do it again, is I think what we're saying.
Can we? Okay.
Yeah, and it's also because we do have a public comment that was lodged. I think that's what. Yeah. So Jess, you're going to read it or play it?
Hi, my name is Rodney Sweet. I live at 630 East 15th Circle, and my phone number is 360-263-6067. I wanted this comment read for the Planning Commission meeting on the 9th of August. I am requesting that the update to the code for parking be extended out for another meeting. There was just one little blurb that I saw in the Columbian that had right in the middle of it, it had a deal about parking trailers and boats and RVs in the driveway or in the street. So I don't think anybody in town has gotten the message on this, and nobody I talked to has. And I would request that this be rescheduled and advertised better. And I'll do my part to get the word out too. And maybe this could prevent another email surge into one of the council meetings, such as happened during the police department changeover. Anyway, I've lived here 21 years, and I just don't think a planning commission meeting to me is for the future, not for what's going on now. So I think this just isn't the proper way to do this. Anyway, thank you. Bye.
All right. Thanks for putting that on, Jess. We do have a member here. We do have a citizen here. If you were interested in making a public comment about, and you might not have an agenda in front of you, but it would be parking code. Okay. Sorry to put you on the spot. I just wanted to make sure I gave you an opportunity if you wanted it. All right. Before I move on, did we have anything else on parking code? We've opened the public hearing and we'll just close the public hearing at this point. Any comments, anything here from you guys? All right. So I am closing the public hearing as of 8:06 p.m. and moving to unfinished business. Did we have, I don't think we had any we have a lot of unfinished business, but not agenda unfinished business.
Sharon, you had mentioned potentially going back to 1.6A and 1.6C to reopen a public comment opportunity in the event that somebody had arrived.
That is a good point. Maybe not specifically the public hearing, but is there anyone online or in person that would like to go back to any of the public hearings that we've had tonight? And those include 16A, which was our discussion of temporary use code. And then the one we just closed was parking code. And the third one was the new home occupation code.
There's just another idea for you. You could also reopen just general public comment if somebody wanted to comment not about an item on the agenda, but just more generally.
Very true. That's a great idea. Let's do that. We'll just open up to any general public comment, not specific to an agenda item.
Sure you don't want to talk?
I would just comment that the doors are locked on an interval, so it makes it difficult for the public.
Oh.
That really works good.
So you found the doors locked and someone had to unlock it?
I believe that they're locked on a general schedule, so that makes it difficult for the public entry.
Thank you. Yeah, we should probably, on nights like this, we should probably.
I think Alex was ambitious and had it set to lock at 7:30, thinking that it would be done.
Are we done?
You clearly
I
haven't
will
attended a
request
meeting.
9 p.m. moving forward, and then I can lock them when we leave if it's sooner.
If it's sooner than that. Yeah, Alex needs to come to planning commission.
Also, nice if the air conditioner would keep working after hours.
Yeah.
I had it extended. You can only do it for 4 hours, so it's probably kicked out now.
How long has it been?
Gotcha.
Think on the right-hand side, you
Yes,
guys,
it already says it's set to 71. It says press here.
Must be the
for
bright
info.
lights. Yeah.
It's the intense negotiation and
It's
discussion.
set on cool already, so I don't know why it's not presently going.
That's fine, we're almost finished.
yeah, it stays pretty warm in here, I feel like.
All right.
We're almost finished.
Yeah, so we have no public comment at this time. Thank you for your comment, though. No other public comments. So I'm going to go ahead and close public comments. Rolling into 1.7, we had no unfinished business on the agenda. Does anyone want to bring up new business at this time? And just so you, hopefully you guys don't take this the wrong way, but in Robert's rules, any of the commissioners could bring up a new piece of business in 1.8 for discussion if you so chose. I know it's not on the agenda, but it does not have to be here to discuss it. As I try to democratize access to the agenda. Any new business? Okay. Moving on to 1.9, which is reports. 1.9a, the community developed staff report. And as always, without Ethan, I would be sitting here not looking good.
I don't think that's true. Okay, so just a quick update for you on a couple items in the community development report and development that's happening in the community. The minute management project, which is item 4 out at the junction, number 4 out at the junction, is in the process of review for their final plat application, and I believe that today they achieved we said that they did everything they need to do for final plat approval.
Is it for the whole thing or just for the first phase?
It's for the whole thing.
Are they still going to do it in phases?
I don't know if they,
The plating will be done as one piece, breaking it into individual lots. I'm not sure for sure on the actual construction phasing, but yes.
Item 12 is Riverside Estates, and they are working on finalizing all of their paperwork for phase 4, which is the park. So they're recording easements and getting prepared for dedication of the park to the city, going down the checklist, making sure they fulfilled all the city's requirements.
Will there be a written judge for that?
Fireworks, assuming burn ban is not in effect, but yes.
It'd be nice if there was maybe on the reader board out here, some flash that says a new city park. If you guys haven't seen it, it's really well done.
Yeah.
Not very big, but it's well done.
Driven by it, I should stop though.
Item 13 is Stevens Hillside Farm Development, and my understanding is they're grading on site there, and they've including tree removal. I don't know if there's any additional update on that one besides that particular thing, if there's anything later on Stevens Hillside.
Just the PDR that we had to go through for the trees.
Right, they did go through a post-decision review because they changed the number of trees that they were going to remove on the site. They were originally going to remove like 120 something, and they decreased that by 48 trees in exchange for removing 2 more trees down near their proposed stormwater pond, but a net gain of 48 trees remaining on the site. So that's a good thing. The 9th Avenue sewer line project, they were in engineering document review, and I believe that they've been told that they've achieved everything they need to for engineering document approval. And we've also issued the final SEPA determination on that. So I think that they're knocking on having everything done that they need to start construction. Ace's View subdivision was deemed incomplete for a second time on August 5th, and so we're meeting with them sometime next week to talk with them about their incompleteness and hopefully, relaying information to them about what they need so they can understand what they have to submit to be deemed complete. The La Center Road CPU flow station, the staff report and decision was issued on August 5th for that, so that's final. We talked about the Stevens Hillside PR, so I think that's it. So I don't know if there's any questions on any of that.
Well, question, what's happening on the property on the east side of Aspen, heading up north of 10th?
So they originally, as you may know, came in with a proposal, a pre-application proposal for multifamily units. That seems to have evaporated. So they're no longer proposing that. It sounds they keep coming back to us with questions, and so one of their most recent questions was about leaving the existing unit on the site and then creating an ADU on a foundation, a second foundation that exists on the site. So they would have the original unit on the site and then an ADU. And I haven't heard
that old home that's there you're talking about, doing something with it?
Sorry.
On the existing structure?
I think they would refurbish
it, that structure?
Yeah, refurbish that structure and then build an ADU.
And then what about the other properties then? Nothing. No.
They didn't indicate they would do anything.
It's
with
quiet
it.
right now.
I think they're just mulling their options over is kind of the best way to put it.
Okay, I've got a question. I get hit quite often. A number of my neighbors close there was, are there some things that the city, based on the depth of that property, are there some things that would be able to be worked into that property through our by code?
Well, so prior to the pre-application meeting for the multifamily units, they had proposed a single family development there. However, because of the requirement in the city's engineering standards that you have public streets if you have 4 or more units, or it's more than 4 units, you have to have public streets if you have 5 or more units. They couldn't fit the public streets and the units on the site because it's so narrow.
Okay.
So that's what caused them to start looking at multifamily. And then that seems to have evaporated, and now they're asking questions
So
about.
they're really limited what they possibly could do there.
It's
And they put a
obviously.
miniature golf course in.
I was, the last one down here, Stevens Hillside, I was looking all over for number 40 on the map.
It's the same as 13.
Twice.
Yeah, it did not get added.
Is it the same as
It
what?
is
Same
13,
one.
13 though. It's just same developer, different
Application.
process.
Yeah.
You might put them both together.
Yeah, that's what I did on the other one.
All right. Any other questions about the community development project list?
The list is getting shorter.
There's not as much activity as there was, 5 or 6 months ago.
Couple of years ago.
All right. Well, I'm going to, thanks Ethan for that. I appreciate it. I'm going to move into planning commissioners, an alternate comment. We'll just start to my right. Commissioner Nuprock, anything?
Just a question on the home occupation staff report, there was a SEPA in there. I've never seen that. Is that something we routinely do for every code change? Okay. Strange thing to do, but.
There's project SEPAs and there's non-project SEPAs. If you're going to break ground and build something, that's a project SEPA. If you're going to update a code or a policy or the comp plan, that's a non.
So that whole list of addressees get notified.
Yep. We even did a SEPA for the SEPA update.
Including Camas and Colt and Vancouver. Okay, never mind. That's all. Thank you.
A question I have, based on the individual who called in, which is I'm glad he did, regarding the parking code, which obviously we're going to tackle further. When you go to the city website, I know that the planning commission was on the reader board, that's happening tonight, but that's not what's on the agenda. And so I know that if you know how to go into our website, the city website, and you dig down, all the right buttons to fit, you can finally get down to see what's on here. But would it be possible to consider on the homepage that would not require someone to go deep diving into, that says this evening's planning commission will cover the following items. There'll be 3 public hearings on these subjects. Just boom. Nothing, no explanation really. Just these are things that are going to be discussed. And I was thinking in the same vein, it would be something on there that would be applicable to the city council, which is tomorrow night. There's some key things on there. Again, you can go deep diving there also if you know how to write, if you know all the right buttons to push. But if there was something on the home page there that just said upcoming meetings, and here's kind of the subject matter, so that people wouldn't have to go searching. They could say, oh, that's what's on. And then underneath, please come, please join us. We want your presence, something, that's welcome. And he said, hey, these are things that we discussed. We would appreciate you coming. Please come and be a part of the in-person session. So, anyways, just some thoughts. I know that was obviously.
Our website will be updated hopefully the beginning of September. It will no longer look like we're living in the 90s. But one of the most websites will have the thing that kind of goes through a couple of updates in the city. So one of them is city council, and I can just ask to have planning commission because it's also important to be added. And essentially by clicking on that, you go to the civic webpage automatically, but it's easy, it's large, it's not how our current website is set up. So I would say once the new website comes out, if you think that seems a little more user friendly. Also, we have the option to be notified anytime the agenda comes out. I click notify subscribers, and we've made it a little bit easier to sign up to be notified instead of hidden behind a bunch of clicks. So I think the new website should solve some of these this issue, but let me know if it still seems difficult at that point.
So my comment is now on your things list, or to-do list. And I'm not looking for a time, but just something that
right.
At some point you can check off if it's okay. We're doing something here or whatever, or come back and say we look at it. We're not going to do it.
No, I think
it's in progress, and check back in September, see if it works for you.
I know we put out like a proposal or a bid for like the website to be completely redone. And I think the challenge with the website is there's a La Center City website, which I think we, the city, maintain.
Yeah.
But then like all of these legal proceedings with the agenda and with the ability for city council to scroll through during the meetings is done by like a third party called CiviWeb.
That's correct.
CiviWeb, which I think rents that access to us. And so if you know to punch through to CiviWeb, it's not too bad, but you got to kind of get through like the almost brochureware of our city's website
So
to do it. And that's what causes the consternation. So I think they're maybe taking the CiviWeb and maybe embedding it into our website or something like that. Or it seems, or it's like more seamless between the two.
Exactly.
Right.
Less navigation to get there.
Yes. Commissioner Nupbrock had a comment. Commissioner Hill, was that your comment? Or?
That was it.
Okay. So I'll do my comment since I just happen to be next in line, but it's awesome to have you guys all person. And as always, thank you guys for keeping us on track. I know it's easy to just say, hey, Ethan, hey, Brian, can you just handle this? And we'll sit in the back seat and keep asking, like, when will we be there? And you guys just keep driving overnight. So thank you for that. Next.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Smith?
It was nice to be together and to meet some of the new folks. I had a question about on the website, when it lists out our planning commissioners and it lists the boards and committees. There was a Parks and Trails Advisory Committee that consisted of Dennis Hill and I was wondering if maybe that's dissolved or I hadn't received an update. Is there any knowledge on that? As I see, it's not listed.
Is that a commission or working?
Well, it was a board or committee, advisory committee.
Advisory committee.
I think the mayor was wanting to bring that back, so maybe just we'll nudge him again, see if we could do that.
Someone asked me about
We're gonna have
that
a lot of
a
parks
couple
fans
months
then.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys could be quite busy with the amount of parks.
Well, yeah, well, when we first, that goes back about 3 years, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. And it was dealing with that and trying to work out with the state various monies, that were available, and as well as working with the county. And yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm very happy to hear the final plating approval for Minute Management. I think that's big news for the city.
I hope that means they're going to move forward. That's really a big thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Keeler?
It's more of a question for Jess. With the work group, sorry, Jess, with the work group between Mr. Nutbrock and myself, you'll reach out to schedule that? Or
Yeah.
should we just work it out on our own?
If you stay a minute afterwards, we can maybe
Okay.
correspond on schedules.
We also need him to be here.
Figured as much. Thank you.
But I'll set up the meeting itself
Okay.
and send reminders and things like
All right. And Commissioner Jones?
I really have no comment other than I know we wanted to be trying to review that, the things of the long year comprehensive plan. And so, again, I was trying to find all of that. And so it's still, what's the best way of proceeding and just reviewing and know what's the things to be concerned about with that comprehensive plan.
Have you found the plan?
I did. Yeah, eventually. I'm trying to find it.
I think just familiarizing yourself with the layout and the, sort of the general contents, because we'll just be looking at the whole thing over the coming years.
And this is more of a long-term kind of project then.
Yeah, it's a long range plan, and the
Long-range.
update of the long range plan is semi long range too, because it'll be concluded in 2025.
Thank you.
All right.
One more comment. I noticed when I looked at the webpage of the planning commission, our esteemed alternate is listed there.
Yeah, I noticed that today too.
that. Yeah, it's on the new website. So it's hard to go back and forth,
Okay, that's fine.
updating both, but no, he should be on there. So.
Awesome. I look forward to that. Good point. We should definitely have them on. Okay. So lately as far as 1.11, we've really not been discussing like the regular agenda in the work session. I'll let you two work with Jess and Ethan on that. And then 1.12, rather than asking everyone about regular attendance, we don't know what our schedules look like a month out. So I've been just, and you guys have been very patient with me. I've just been texting you or calling you. So thanks for putting up with that. We have finished our agenda. And if there are no objections, I would adjourn.
So moved.
All right.
Aye.
Hearing no objection, we are adjourned, and I'll make it official. Because I keep forgetting. Thanks, guys.
Very good. Nice to meet you. Nice
Yeah,
to
nice to meet you too. It's so, if you would have called me, I'm like, oh yeah, Commissioner Smith.